The Erebus, a deep space salvage vessel, is on a routine mission when it intercepts a distress beacon near the Orion Nebula. The signal belongs to the Icarus, a mining ship that vanished 10 years ago. Captain Reyna Solis, a seasoned but pragmatic leader, reviews the message, an eerie looping transmission that simply states, "They're still here." Despite reservations from her crew, Reyna orders a course toward the Icarus. The ship is found drifting near an unstable region of space, where subspace anomalies are common. Scans reveal no external damage and no life signs, but the beacon continues, broadcasting. The ship's power levels are mysteriously fluctuating, suggesting something is still active inside. Chief Engineer Holt and Science Officer Malik argue against boarding, citing the dangers of gravitational anomalies in the nebula. But Reyna sees an opportunity. The Icarus was carrying valuable mining tech, possibly even experimental energy sources. Recovering its cargo could be a financial windfall for their struggling crew. After a heated discussion, the decision is made. They will dock and investigate. As the Erebus approaches, strange readings spike across their instruments. Momentary energy surges, phantom signals, and bursts of static interference. The ship's AI warns of temporal distortions, but before they can react, the docking clamps engage. The airlock cycles open on its own. Something is waiting. The salvage team, Reyna, Holt, Malik, and Security Officer Tessa, step into the Icarus. The air is cold and stale, but the ship remains eerily intact. There are no signs of violence, no bodies, and yet, something feels off. Shadows stretch unnaturally under the flickering emergency lights. The corridors echo with faint whispers, like distant voices carried on dead air. They split into teams. Reyna and Holt head to the bridge to access the logs, while Malik and Tessa check the engineering bay. As they explore, their comms crackle with static. Ghostly distortions flicker at the edges of their vision. Hallucinations, they assume, caused by the ship's failing systems. Then, the first anomaly occurs. Malik turns a corner and sees a figure, standing at the end of the hall. A man in an Icarus uniform, his face blurred like a corrupted hologram. He reaches out, and then vanishes. Before Malik can react, the ship's intercom crackles to life. A distorted voice murmurs, "They're still here." Reyna and Holt reach the bridge and activate the ship's logs. At first, the data is corrupted, glitching images, overlapping voices. But after a few manual overrides, a fragmented video plays. It shows the Icarus crew in distress, talking about temporal fractures and something they called the bleed. As they watch, the footage distorts, and a shadowy figure looms behind the crew before the recording cuts to static. Meanwhile, Malik and Tessa explore the engineering bay, where they find strange energy signatures pulsing from the ship's reactor core. Their instruments flicker between reading normal conditions and detecting extreme radiation levels. Suddenly, Tessa collapses, gasping that she saw figures moving around them. People trapped in moments of time, endlessly repeating their final actions. The intercom blares again, but this time the voice is layered, as if multiple versions of the same person are speaking at once. "You're out of time." Alarms blare across the Icarus and the ship's systems begin to power up on their own. Doors lock, corridors shift, and the lighting distorts. The Erebus crew scrambles to regroup, but the layout of the ship seems to be changing around them, warping into a maze. Malik attempts to contact the Erebus, but the signal is overridden. The viewports show something horrifying. The nebula outside seems to be moving, swirling with unnatural shapes that pulse as if they are alive. Tessa, still shaken, points to the reactor core, which is now pulsating with a dark red glow. The logs mentioned the bleed, some kind of interdimensional rift caused by the Icarus's mining operations. If they don't shut it down, they may become permanently trapped in this fractured reality. Reyna makes a call. They have to reach the reactor and shut it down before it's too late. But as they move, shadowy figures start appearing more frequently, echoes of the past crew frozen in time. Some of them turn to look at them, their eyes hollow and glowing with an unnatural light. The temperature drops sharply, and a deep hum resonates through the ship, as if the structure itself is awakening. The whispers intensify, overlapping voices murmuring warnings and pleas, making it impossible to distinguish reality from illusion. Tessa shudders, gripping her weapon tightly. "They're watching us now," she whispers, "and they don't want us to leave." Pushing forward, the team reaches the reactor room, where they find the true source of the disturbance. A massive rift pulses in the center of the chamber, swirling with chaotic energy. Logs from the ship reveal that the Icarus had attempted to mine an exotic substance from the nebula, an element that destabilized time itself. The crew, in their desperation, tried to contain the rift, but instead, they became trapped in a temporal feedback loop. Reyna scans the core and discovers that shutting it down conventionally would only worsen the situation. The only way to collapse the rift safely is to overload the reactor, but doing so means they have minutes to escape before the ship is destroyed. Holt initiates the countdown. As they turn to flee, the echoes of the crew solidify, blocking their way. Some are screaming, others begging for help. One reaches out to Reyna, whispering in a voice that chills her. "You can't leave." Panic surges through the team as the reactor pulses violently, sending out waves of destabilizing energy. The ship groans as reality itself begins to fragment. Hallways loop back on themselves, rooms shift, and the air feels thick with unseen pressure. Tessa fires at one of the solidified echoes, but her shots pass through harmlessly, distorting the figures momentarily before they reassemble. Malik shouts over the chaos, pointing to an emergency maintenance shaft. "This might get us." Back to the docking bay. With no other choice, they sprint for it, dodging collapsing corridors and flickering anomalies that threaten to pull them into nothingness. As they climb through the shaft, the Icarus fights to hold them within its fractured time loop. The whispers become deafening now in familiar voices, old friends, lost loved ones, pleading with them to stay. Reyna grits her teeth, forcing herself to ignore the siren-like calls as she pulls herself up into the final corridor leading to the airlock. But just as they reach the docking bay, a massive distortion warps the space ahead. A shadowy, monstrous entity, a fusion of the Icarus's lost crew, emerges, blocking their path. It moves unnaturally, its form constantly shifting between recognizable faces and something utterly alien. "Stay with us," it beckons, its voice layered with dozens of others. "We are forever." Reyna doesn't hesitate. She grabs a nearby plasma cutter and slashes through the emergency release mechanism of the docking clamps. "Get on the Erebus now!" she yells. Holt and Tessa drag Malik, who is momentarily entranced by the entity's whispers, forcing him into the airlock just as another violent tremor shakes the ship. The Erebus's AI automatically initiates emergency disengagement. As the salvage vessel pulls away, the Icarus convulses, imploding as the reactor reaches critical overload. A blinding flash erupts from within, consuming the ghost ship in an expanding wave of energy. The shockwave hurls the Erebus away, sending it spiraling before stabilizing. For a long moment, silence. The nebula, once distorted by the rift's influence, slowly returns to normal. The Icarus is gone. Reyna exhales sharply, exchanging glances with her shaken crew. They survived, but something feels wrong. Malik stares at his reflection in the console, his eyes momentarily flickering with an unnatural glow before returning to normal. No one else notices. As the Erebus drifts away, from the nebula, the tension in the cabin slowly eases. Holt checks the ship's systems, confirming they remain intact despite the shockwave. Tessa takes a deep breath, sinking into a seat, her knuckles still white from gripping her weapon. "We made it," she mutters, almost as if she doesn't believe. Irena nods but remains silent, staring at the fading remnants of the nebula. Something gnaws at her, an instinct she's learned to trust. They escaped, but at what cost? The ship's AI suddenly announces an anomaly. A faint, repeating signal is coming from the Erebus's own data logs. Malik frowns and pulls up the transmission. The screen flickers, and a distorted voice crackles through the speakers. "They're still here." The crew freezes, the same message the Icarus had sent. The cabin lights flicker just slightly, and a cold draft sweeps through the room, though all airlocks remain sealed. Malik quickly shuts the transmission off, but his hands tremble. Reyna grips the controls, her expression unreadable. "Set course for home," she orders again, more firmly this time. As the Erebus accelerates, she watches Malik out of the corner of her eye. He avoids her gaze, his fingers absently twitching against the console. Deep in the reflection of the ship's darkened viewport, for just a second, another figure stands behind them, watching, waiting, and then it's gone. "Set course for home," Reyna orders, her voice steady. But deep down, she can't shake the feeling that the Icarus never truly let them go. Later that night, as the crew sleeps, Malik sits alone in the dimly lit cockpit, staring out into the void. He grips the armrest tightly, his mind echoing with whispers just beyond comprehension. His reflection in the viewport lingers a second too long before turning to look at him with eyes that are not his own. A faint, knowing smile spreads across his reflection's face before it vanishes, leaving Malik alone in the silence of space.